First of all, I'd like to place in the record without objection a letter addressed to the chairman and ranking member in the committee dated June 14, 2012, and it's on Heritage Action Stationery. It is by numerous former government officials, including obviously Mr. Rumsfeld, John Bolton, Edwin Meese, many, many others, who reach a very, very different conclusion than the two of the witnesses here today.
Absolutely. Without objection, that will be made part of the record.
I've got, there are so many parts of this. I'm going to focus on just one, and it's going to pick up right where you left off, Mr. Bellinger. I have your testimony in front of me, and this caught my eye, so I'm going to focus on it. And on the fourth paragraph on page 10, you state, quote, "Some have argued that the convention might obligate the U.S. to comply with international environmental agreements, such as Kyoto Protocol, to which the U.S. is not a party." You stated that. I'm one of those people, except you understated it. I don't believe that it might. I believe it will. The first sentence of the next paragraph, you state conclusory, "The terms of the convention do not require parties to comply with other international environmental treaties." That was your conclusion. Then you quote a real small portion of one sentence to reach that conclusion. I know you're familiar with this, but I wish you'd take the treaty in front of you there and open with me to Article 212, subsection 1. It's on page 175. Have you got that in front of you? Pardon? Okay, great. The very first part of the sentence says, "States shall adopt laws and regulations to prevent, reduce, and control pollution." Nothing wrong with that. The United States has already done that. There's no sideboards on it. It doesn't say exactly what we have to do as long as we enact some kind of laws. Don't have any difficulty with that. But then when you turn to Article 222, and if you will go down to the middle of the first paragraph, if you read what we just read, I'm sorry, Article 222, page 180. Page 180. It's about the middle of the page, and the treaty goes on to state that the signatories, quote, shall, again the word shall adopt laws and regulations and take other measures necessary to implement applicable international rules and standards established through competent international organizations or diplomatic conference to prevent, reduce, and control pollution. That is going to be the law of the land if we accede to this treaty. How long do you think it's going to take a federal judge to find Kyoto or any one of the other conventions that they have as being a competent international organization which has set standards and rules which by this language we have acceded to? I mean, you're going to find a gaggle of judges tripping over each other to force the EPA and other organizations in the United States to say, you shall, just as the Congress, the United States Senate has said, you shall adopt these rules and regulations. That doesn't trouble you at all?
Well, we looked at and Senator, I really do appreciate your concerns because these were exactly some of the issues that we looked at in the Bush administration. You will recall in our first year, one of the treaties that we rejected was, in fact, the Kyoto Protocol. So the Bush administration was very concerned about that.
And that's good, but we want to focus on this language, which is black and white.
I just want to emphasize that we were approaching this from a perspective that I think is sympathetic to your position. With respect to 212, and then I will go on to 222, it says we shall adopt laws and regulations to prevent, reduce, and control pollution, but then only taking into account internationally agreed rules. So we don't have to enact Kyoto.
Nothing wrong with that.
222 says that we shall enforce those laws that have been adopted in accordance with Article 212, paragraph 1. So it says we have to enforce our own laws.
Nothing wrong with that, but after what you just read, the next word is and with other provisions of this convention, and shall adopt laws and regulations and take other measures necessary to implement, etc.
And the key word there, Senator, is applicable. Applicable international rules and standards. if we haven't signed it, it's not applicable to us.
Well, Mr. Bellinger, I would greatly disagree with that reading of it. It doesn't say that at all. If it did say that, you'd say that in plain English. What they mean by applicable, by the word applicable, is applicable rules to the situation at hand.
Well, I understand you're reading the plain text of it. It is very difficult to read, as all of us have pointed out, language like this, and I agree with you. That's why it took us in the Bush administration a considerable amount of time to work our way through these. And all I can tell you, Senator, is you raise a legitimate concern, but that the longstanding view of the Bush administration and of the, I understand it, the new administration, is that to say an applicable international rule means that it has to apply to you. Treaties that have been negotiated by other people to whom we are not party don't apply to us. And Secretary Rumsfeld, I think, would probably agree there were lots of international human rights rules that people said we ought to abide by that we were not party to, and we would say those are not applicable to us because we have not become party to them.
And you're willing to take the chance that tortured interpretation will be accepted by a United States District Court in the United States?
Well, again, sir, I am with you on this in that you raise concerns. I have seen lots of lawfare brought by groups, by other countries, by people who are upset with the United States. I think it is fair to raise that as a concern. That is the view of the U.S. government about the meaning of those terms. And I think then, on balance, even if this is a fair concern, you have to take into account the cost versus the benefit. And with respect to U.S. companies, there's a false choice to suggest that U.S. companies, if we don't join the treaty, can still go ahead and mine. And so we're basically denying them the opportunity, even if you have a fair point on environmental litigation, the benefits of the treaty to U.S. businesses and to the U.S. Treasury and to the U.S. Navy outweigh what may well be a fair concern to raise.
Appreciate your judgment in that regard, and thank you, Mr. Bellinger, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your...
Senator, as you're taking off or going home, whatever it is, Article 297, I would direct you to take a moment to read that in your travels.
I've read 297.
Paragraph C, which is pretty clear that the only way in which anything regarding the environment would apply to us is where it is applicable to us because we've signed up to it or we're part of it. And I think that's exactly what Mr. Bellinger is saying. So in fact, within the four corners of this agreement is a dispensation against any state, the United States or anybody else who hasn't signed up to the international law. So there's no standing, there's no exposure.
I don't read it that way, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's the language. It's hard not to read the language that way because that's what it says.
I agree with you more that the language is black and white.
If you only take one section, you can read it your way, but if you apply the entire law, it's different.
And Senator Risch, and I know you need to leave, I want to simply say I don't want that to be an argument between us. I think it's a completely fair point reading that language and a fair question to ask, and there's an argument on the other side. I've given you what is the view, I think, of both the Bush administration, which looked at these things very seriously and was very concerned about environmental litigation and ultimately felt that that was the better interpretation of that provision. And even counterbalancing those risks, still overall the benefits of the treaty would still counterbalance against the risks that you've raised. So I understand and support those concerns.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Senator Risch.